be prepared for a shock because the reality is not a good one.
Tell us about your experience looking for work in Quebec.
Well, my experience about, looking for a job is not that simple because it's quite hard to find a job.
Being ignored by employers.
It feels like my education was a waste of time.
But it is possible to find jobs.
I am located in Quebec City. Luckily, I have actually found a position that perfectly goes with my background.
I'm currently living in Baie-Comeau, Quebec. I have been employed.
I'm located in New Carlisle in Gaspésie, and after falling in love with the place, I wanted to stay. However, I have considered leaving Quebec to find work.
There is no shortage of work in Montreal, but there is a shortage of his quality work.
I was in debt. I fell back on the job that I'd done in school, which was serving.
I feel like the job market is just too tight here to only be an English-speaking social worker.
I have considered leaving Quebec.
It's not like we don't want to learn French. We want to, but sometimes it's beyond us.
So it's hard to get noticed, it's hard to get hired.
It's hard to get experience and it's hard to get your foot in the door.
It is horrible.
Before you think this is a problem that just afflicts people with no education, consider this. Youth Employment Services says that more than half the people they deal with have undergraduate degrees and another 17% have master's degrees.
I find there is a certain sense of hopelessness at times.
And with its population aging faster than anywhere else in Canada, Quebec cannot afford to lose any members of this next bright generation.
I had thought that if I'd done well at school, if I'd done all the quote-unquote right internships at all the right places, then I was all set. Couldn't be further from the truth. I started off studying a major in biology with a minor in chemistry, and then I switched to economics. Today I'm doing IT recruiting. When I first graduated, it took me about 6 months to find a job. In all the times I've been hired, I think not one time was it based on a CV, not one time was the decision even based following reading a CV. So that was a bit of a shock, I think. Despite the enormous effort that went into it.
This ongoing challenge that somebody goes to university and what they learn in university doesn't necessarily prepare them for the workforce is a constant one we hear.
The issue of overqualified youth is actually one that, frankly, we were not looking for, but in the last 2 successful interviews for a paralegal position, we were surprised to have lawyers apply for that job. And that was not at all unique. It's been very prevalent in the last 3 or 4 years. MBAs applying for starting entry positions are common. At first we would question, why is this person even applying for the job? Now we're realizing there's just a lot of qualified people out there. Education is broadly available, and jobs are also less available. So it's the perfect storm for a bad combination.
I always thought I was going to be an academic. I'm an intellectual. I like ideas. I studied physics and philosophy, completed that degree, and then did a master's in philosophy just this past year. With tenure, you have a lot of professors who are staying on longer than they probably should. There's no way for universities to get rid of them. And the positions that are being offered to new grads are usually teaching positions that are poorly compensated. There's no job security whatsoever. It's a short-term contract. It's a lot of work. It's the most tedious part of being an academic, but they're giving it to the poor, starving grad students or recent grads. I had that moment of, well, what am I going to do with my life? I don't know. I work for an event company as a waiter bartender. They will send me emails with contracts. Right now it's not a very busy time of year. And while this is all going on, I'm applying for jobs and interviews.
I have very professional clients. I have engineers, lawyers, I've had doctors, and they are working as waiters, they are working as telecommunications people. It's quite disheartening for them. I think it really kind of plays with their career identity and that hat.
I had a lot to offer, and I think I would be fantastic, but not having the experience, you get looked over regardless of what you have to offer.
Lots of grads are doing unpaid internships, which just breaks my heart. And all because they don't have experience and they need the experience to get the job, and then it's just a really vicious circle.
It's getting harder and harder. Even if I look at us, we had very few freelancers 10 years ago. I'd say, we'd have one or two, probably in the graphic design group where it was easy to sort of do it. And now in every department, we're sort of looking a little bit to say, okay, rather than having 8 people in that department, can we have 7 and sort of use one person half-time as it comes in, because margins are tougher, business is tougher, everything's a little bit tougher, so you have to be a little bit smarter with everything that you're doing. And what that sometimes looks like is a lot more freelancing and a lot less full-time employers. Is it concerning? Yes. Is it likely to get better right away? Probably not.
It has been a challenge because there's always contract job out there. But for me, it's very important, the security and benefits. That way I know that I can buy a house, I can have a mortgage. Looking for a job has been a challenge because you send out so many CVs, you don't know if the person has actually read them or seen them, or if they just threw it in a garbage. One thing that really struck me was applying for a really important job, important in the sense that I was very interested in a job. And I sent in the application 5 days before the deadline. So I called them and said, did you receive my application? And they had mentioned that the job has been filled. Here I am, I've waited anxiously for 5 days, and now I'm told that the job has actually been filled. We didn't take out the posting.
Most companies have a policy where you cannot contact their human resources. So if you want to write a cover letter, to address it to a person, to attempt to engage them to read what you've written, you can't even do that. The only option you have left is to show up. And a lot of places don't respond well to that. I actually had one just recently, such a moment where I showed up and my presence was not welcome. They told me they don't accept CVs, they don't read CVs, they have a completely different application process. So they want you to go online, sign up with them, build something using their service, and use that as your application. From their perspective, it means that they have to engage the prospective employee to learn their system, demonstrate their creativity, and do all sorts of things that show a lot about a person. However, from someone who's looking for a job, it's incredibly frustrating. You've built a CV, you're trying to get someone to read it, and you put a lot of work into it, to just be told, I won't even bother reading it. The workload is very much on the side of the job seeker, and there's almost nothing required of the employer. It's a very, very uneven balance. It should be a two-way street, in my opinion.
I was a personal trainer for the last 10 years, and I did a lot of work in neuroscience and kinesiology. I also taught wellness and physical activity. I'm originally from Malaysia. When I came to Canada 5 years ago, my Australian education was helpful because it was in English. However, it wasn't sufficient because it probably wasn't on par with the Canadian education. I'm not fluent in French. I've started studying French about 8 months ago. If you don't have French, it puts you at a less competitive edge.
What secondary migration means is that people who are first arriving here in Quebec choose within a reasonably brief period of time to relocate somewhere else. Really what's unfortunate about that is that the province of Quebec invests quite considerably in trying to attract some of these individuals to come to Quebec, which include a certain number of English speakers, who then choose to pursue some opportunity elsewhere because they don't feel that the expectation that they had for what they would encounter and what they would accomplish while they're here is something they can achieve. Migration is a very important issue in terms of the economic productivity of any society. And in this case, the fact that a lot of English-speaking younger people who are well-educated end up picking up their bags and basically moving elsewhere is going to have a negative impact on an economy that needs to try to retain precisely these types of individuals.
I am originally from East Europe, from Bulgaria, and then I ended up here because of my husband. He's local, so we decided to establish our family in here. I maybe expected that it's more like in Europe in terms of having a lot of adverts, and the market is mostly focused on posting an advert and finding applicants throughout the adverts. But it appears that most of the positions are filled in with internal staff or recommendations, so people need connections in order to find the right job for them.
I'm bilingual, so that is not a problem. But my skill set was better directed towards working in English than in French. And if you want to do that, Montreal is not the option. You either go down to New York or Toronto.
By and large, people with the same skill set and same level of education doesn't result in equality or similar levels of unemployment, but higher levels of unemployment amongst the English-speaking segment of the population, sometimes considerably higher. Even those who are able to speak the French language still have higher rates of unemployment compared to their Francophone colleagues.
When we're working with clients, I go through at least 2 boxes of Kleenex a month. All of it's coming out, all that fear, the terror of like, I'm terrified to network, I'm really introverted, I'm really shy. I wouldn't know the first thing to say about myself. And it's what I call the secret lives of our clients. Mental health also is a cycle of poverty. So I'm in debt, I'm unemployed, my family's not with me, and now what ends up happening? I start to not feel well. I'm feeling sick, or I become sick, physically ill. Then what happens? Maybe I'm going to get depressed, maybe I'm going to have anxiety, and ultimately unable to work. I see brilliant, bright, and now I get verklempt kids every day that are really struggling, and they're lovely. They're lovely, and they're talented, and they're smart, and I think they deserve to be acknowledged as, can I please have an opportunity? And then it becomes, well, I have to, with everything, with all my heart and all my might, bump myself up to be courageous, to market myself. So I think the tone then changes, right? Then the delivery becomes like, oh, you're entitled. I think these people are just trying to muster up enough guts to make some kind of a stand for themselves.
I think it's just a lot of 20-year-olds mistakenly get accused of acting entitled. The reality is, I very much believe that our younger employees over the years have been far more dynamic, far more performing, and definitely just more productive than older people who may have just become disengaged and are really just surfing the punch clock, as the expression says. So I would say the opposite. I would encourage people to hire young people. And it keeps you thinking young. It certainly keeps you on your feet.
I just got a brand new job. We do cold calling and selling to especially corporate America. Well, it's a lower pay job than what I expected, but I wanted to be there. I wanted to learn. What I feel every day, it's great. I wake up knowing that I have somewhere to go to. Now I have a routine.
10,000 people are telling you there's a problem. I think it's time to pay attention.
There's no magic solution to this, but there are ways of trying to address it.
Appreciating what I am able to bring to the table, and then working with that to improve it.
More networking events, and they can get to know more the people that are coming from the universities, the immigrants that are coming.
It doesn't really matter what your experience is, what your education is. I think the most important thing is the kind of person you are. Are you a hard worker?
Just be a little more lenient towards, the kid just out of high school looking for a job, because you might find a very valuable employee.
I find that we're trying to solve problems by assuming what people think instead of sitting down and actually having a conversation. So I would highly recommend bringing young people to the table.
So I would say to put as much money as they can into the whole entrepreneurial scene in Quebec.
I don't think anybody should be able to graduate from university without doing an apprenticeship, period.
I think that having disengaged youth will only cause exponential problems later. So I think we should be putting more emphasis on the early jobs.
Honestly, it's not easy. And I think that the minute you sort of accept the fact that it's not going to be easy to find a job, and life's not going to be easy all the time, and life's not going to be fair all the time, keep on working on it, keep on fighting for it, and eventually you'll find your niche.
Surround yourself with positive people, with positive occurrences. Go out, take a walk, see what's beautiful around you.
And we need to stop the blame game. So it's the youth's problem because they're entitled and unmotivated. It's the employer's problem because they don't contact you and at least tell you that you didn't get the job even when you've interviewed for it. It's always somebody else's issue. This is a global issue.
I believe that the government, business, nonprofits, educational institutions need to all sit down and really start looking at strategies that could address the whole issue of youth unemployment and underemployment.